Welcome to Vietnam Legal and Investment Insights. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that can be, pretty confusing for expats who are investing here in Vietnam.
Yeah,
It's all about delisting
exactly.
and what it means for you as an investor.
That's right. We'll be drawing from the Delisting Process and Procedures, Comprehensive Guide 2024 from our firm, Vietnam Harley Miller. This guide is really a fantastic resource for, anyone who is looking to understand the ins and outs of delisting in Vietnam.
So think of it this way. You've invested in a company here in Vietnam,
Right.
and suddenly you hear it's being delisted.
Yeah.
What does that mean for your investment? Where do you even begin to understand your rights?
Right.
That's what we're here to uncover.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. What is delisting? Well, delisting basically means that a company's shares are no longer traded on the stock exchange.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like a shop closing its doors, right?
Okay.
You can't easily buy or sell your ownership in that shop anymore.
So it's like my investment is just frozen in time.
In a way, yes. And that lack of trading can actually make your investment less attractive to others. It becomes harder to kind of turn your shares back into cash, right?
Right.
The guide actually refers to this as a decrease in liquidity,
Okay.
which can impact the value of your investment.
Okay, that makes sense. But why would a company in Vietnam choose to delist in the first place?
Well, the Delisting Process and Procedures Guide outlines two main types of delisting. There's mandatory and voluntary delisting.
Mandatory delisting, that sounds serious.
It can be. Yeah, for sure. Imagine a company that's been inactive for a whole year, no trading, no news, no activity, essentially a ghost town on the stock exchange. That's definitely grounds for mandatory delisting. Or if a company is caught breaking the law or falsifying records, they could be forced to delist as well.
So it's like the stock exchange is saying, you're not playing by the rules, get out.
Exactly. And then there are situations where a company has been losing money, for several years in a row.
Yeah.
To protect investors, the stock exchange might step in and delist the company.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a safety measure to prevent people from just like continually investing in a struggling company.
Right, exactly.
But what about voluntary delisting? Why would a company willingly leave the stock exchange?
Yeah, there are a number of reasons for that. So let's say a company is restructuring, undergoing a change in ownership. Delisting could be part of that strategy. Or maybe they want to join a different stock exchange, right? One that aligns better with their goals or has different listing requirements.
So it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes
Yes.
it's just like a strategic decision by the company.
Exactly. And sometimes the cost of staying listed on the stock exchange outweighs the benefits, right? For smaller companies especially, maintaining a listing can be expensive.
Yeah.
And they might decide to just go private instead.
Wow. There are a lot more reasons for delisting than I thought. So let's say a company I've invested in, is going through this process. What actually happens? What are the steps involved?
Sure. So the delisting process and procedures guide, it really lays out all the steps in detail,
Right.
both for voluntary and mandatory delisting.
Okay, yeah. We don't need to go through every single step right now,
Right.
but maybe we can just, hit the highlights,
Yeah, of course.
just so our listeners can get like a general understanding.
Sure. So for voluntary delisting, a key element is the shareholder vote, right? The smaller investors in a company have a say in the decision to delist. And there's a rule that prevents companies from delisting too soon after they initially list, right?
Okay.
So this ensures stability, prevents quick flips and things like that.
So there are like safeguards in place to protect investors from sudden surprises?
Exactly. And for mandatory delisting, there's a period of time after the decision is made where trading is still allowed, right? This gives investors a chance to kind of sell their shares if they want to,
Right.
knowing that the company will soon be delisted.
Okay.
This is clearly outlined in the guide we're referencing.
Okay, so the process is structured, right?
Yeah.
And there are kind of protections for investors.
Right.
But let's get down to like the heart of the matter. What happens to me, the investor,
Yeah.
during this whole delisting process?
Right.
What are my rights?
Yeah, that's a crucial question. And our guide actually addresses it directly. It really boils down to like three key investor protections, right?
Okay.
Transparency, a buyback plan, and a fair price.
Okay, let's break those down one by one.
Sure.
Starting with transparency. What does that mean in this context?
So transparency means the company must be completely open and honest with you about the delisting, right? They have to explain what's happening, why it's happening, and what it means for your investment. No shady, backroom deals,
No.
everything out in the open.
Okay, that sounds fair. So no surprises.
Right.
What about the buyback plan?
Yeah.
What's that all about?
So the buyback plan is designed to give you an option.
Right.
If you don't want to hold on to your shares after the company is delisted, right, the company is obligated to offer to buy back your shares at a fair price.
Okay.
This ensures that you're not stuck with shares in a company that's no longer publicly traded.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be left holding shares that I can't easily sell.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a fair price. How is that determined?
Yeah. So the fair price is typically based on a number of factors, including the company's financial performance, recent trading prices, and sometimes even an independent valuation, right?
Right.
It's not just some random number.
Right.
There are established methods to ensure that investors are treated fairly during a delisting.
So there are like safeguards in place to protect investors from being lowballed, essentially. Okay. This all sounds very complicated. What if I'm just a regular investor, not a financial expert, and I'm feeling a bit lost?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It can be a complex process, and that's why it's so important to remember that you have resources available, right? Here at Vietnam Harley Miller, we specialize in helping expats like you navigate these legal and financial waters.
Okay.
We can explain your rights, help you understand the delisting process, and make sure you're getting a fair deal.
So if you're an expat investor and you hear the word delisting, don't panic. Just remember those three key protections: transparency, a buyback plan, and a fair price.
Yeah.
And of course, don't hesitate to reach out to the experts at Vietnam Harley Miller for guidance.
Exactly. We're here to help. Now let's dive a bit deeper into some of the specific reasons why companies might be delisted. Understanding those reasons can really help you make more informed decisions as an investor.
Yeah.
So we touched on mandatory delisting earlier.
All right.
But our delisting process and procedures outlines quite a few specific situations that can trigger this.
Let's hear it. What are some of the scenarios that might lead to a company being, forced off the stock exchange?
Well, some are pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Like if the company loses its legal status as a public company, right?
Right.
Or if their business registration is revoked, that's pretty clear cut.
Yeah. Yeah. If a company isn't even allowed to operate legally, it makes sense that they can't be on the stock exchange.
Yeah.
But what about some of the less obvious reasons?
Sure. So one trigger is if a company's shares just stop being traded, right?
Right.
For an extended period of time. It's like the market has lost interest. And that can raise concerns for the stock exchange.
Well, it's like a product sitting on a shelf for too long, nobody wants it.
Exactly. And then there's the case where a company is approved for listing,
Right.
but then their shares don't actually start trading within a specific time frame. That can also raise red flags.
It's like they got stage fright right before the big opening night.
That's a great analogy, yeah. And of course, we already mentioned the scenario where a company is consistently losing money, right?
Right.
That's a clear signal that something might be wrong.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets, really interesting. The guide also mentions something called adverse audit opinions
Okay.
as a reason for mandatory delisting.
Okay. Break that down for us. What does that even mean?
So it means that an independent auditor, right, has looked at the company's finances and found some serious problems.
Whoa.
They might refuse to sign off on the company's financial statements,
Okay.
or they might issue a report that, highlights major issues with the company's accounting practices.
So it's like getting a bad report card from the financial police.
Exactly. And if a company receives, multiple bad reports in a row,
Yeah.
that's a big red flag for the stock exchange.
Yeah.
It signals a lack of transparency,
Right.
potentially even fraudulent activity.
Okay.
And speaking of fraud, the guide also mentions that falsifying listing documents
Right.
is grounds for mandatory delisting.
So no cooking the books to make the company look better than it is.
Nope. Transparency is key. And the same goes for, information disclosure, right?
Right.
If a company seriously violates its obligations to disclose important information to investors,
Right.
or if it fails to meet its financial obligations to the stock exchange, that can also trigger mandatory delisting.
So it's not just about the company's like internal finances. It's also about how they interact with the stock exchange
Right.
and with investors.
Precisely. Transparency and accountability are crucial.
Okay.
Now, on the flip side,
Yeah.
let's talk more about those voluntary delisting scenarios.
Right.
We mentioned a few earlier, but there are some nuances that are worth exploring.
Let's dive in. I'm particularly curious about that situation where a company might want to, switch to a different stock exchange.
Right. So imagine a company that's outgrown its current stock exchange, right?
Thanks. Yeah.
Maybe they've become more successful, they're attracting international attention,
Yeah.
and they want to list on, a bigger exchange with more prestigious listing requirements.
So it's like, moving from a local market to the big leagues.
Exactly, exactly. Or perhaps they're targeting, a specific type of investor that's more common on a different exchange. So they might delist from one and relist on another. That's, a better fit for their growth strategy.
Makes sense. And what about that scenario where a company decides to go private? Why would they choose that route?
Well, sometimes a company might feel that the burdens of being a publicly listed company just outweigh the benefits, right?
Yeah.
The regulations, the reporting requirements, the scrutiny from investors,
Mhm.
it can all become, a bit much. They
Wow.
might decide that they can operate, more efficiently
Right.
and make decisions more effectively if they're not beholden to, a large group of shareholders.
So it's like trading in the spotlight for
Yeah.
a bit more like privacy and control.
Exactly. And sometimes, as we mentioned earlier, staying listed is just too expensive, right?
Yeah.
The costs of, compliance reporting, investor relations, it can really add up,
Right.
especially for smaller companies.
So they might decide that those resources are better spent elsewhere, like growing their business.
Precisely. Now, remember, these are just some of the key scenarios outlined in Vietnam Harley Miller's delisting process and procedures
Yeah.
guide, right? It's a comprehensive resource that can really help expats understand this complex aspect of investing in Vietnam.
Absolutely. It's like having a roadmap to navigate the sometimes confusing world of delisting.
Exactly, exactly. And as we've been discussing, delisting isn't always a negative sign, right? It can be a strategic move for companies.
All
And
right.
as long as investors are aware of their rights and, have access to clear information, they can navigate the process with confidence.
That's right. Transparency is paramount, and our delisting process and procedures guide really emphasizes that.
Yes.
Companies are obligated to keep their investors informed every step of the way, from the initial decision to delist all the way through the final procedures.
And that's where Vietnam Harley Miller comes in, right? We're the experts who can help expats understand all the legal ins and outs of this process.
Absolutely. Delisting can be complex, especially in a dynamic market like Vietnam.
Right.
But Vietnam Harley Miller is here to help. We can break down the jargon, clarify your rights as an investor, and ensure you're treated fairly throughout the process.
That's great advice. And remember the delisting process and procedures. Comprehensive Guide 2024 is available on our website,
Okay.
mlf.vn. It's a fantastic resource that can really empower you as an investor here in Vietnam.
So whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, delisting is something you need to be aware of in the Vietnamese market.
Yeah.
But with the right information and support, you can navigate this process with confidence. Thanks for joining us on Vietnam Legal and Investment Insights.
It's been a pleasure discussing this important topic with you.
So delisting can be, a bit of a roller coaster. But what happens to my shares after a company is delisted? Do they just disappear?
Not necessarily. The guide actually explains that even after a company is delisted from, the main stock exchange,
Right.
their shares might still be traded, just not as easily.
Yeah.
It's like moving from a bustling supermarket to a smaller local shop.
Okay. So there's still a chance to buy or sell.
Yes, but it's important to remember that trading on these smaller markets can be, a bit riskier.
Okay.
The volume of trades is lower, which means it might take longer to find a buyer or a seller for your shares.
Right.
And the prices can fluctuate more dramatically.
Okay, so it's not a complete dead end,
Right.
but it's definitely something to be aware of.
Exactly. That's why it's, crucial to understand your rights as an investor and to have all the information before making any decisions.
Speaking of rights, let's go back to those three key investor protections you mentioned earlier. Transparency, a buyback plan, and a fair price.
Right.
Can you elaborate on those a bit more?
Absolutely. Let's start with transparency. This is perhaps the most important protection
Okay.
because it ensures that you are kept in the loop throughout the entire delisting process.
Right.
The company is obligated to provide you with clear and timely information about why they're delisting,
Okay.
what it means for you, and what your options are. They can't just leave you in the dark.
So no surprises. I like that.
Right, exactly.
What about the buyback plan?
Yeah.
How does that work in practice?
So if you decide that you don't want to hold on to your shares after the company's delisted,
Right.
the buyback plan gives you a way out. The company is required to offer to buy back your share
Okay.
at a price that is deemed fair.
Okay.
This ensures that you have the option to cash out if you're not comfortable with the risks associated with holding delisted shares.
So I'm not forced to hold on to shares
Right.
that I might not want anymore.
Exactly.
That's reassuring. But how is that fair price determined? Is it just up to the company to decide?
No, it's not arbitrary. The guide outlines several methods for determining a fair price. It usually involves looking at the company's financial performance, recent trading prices, and sometimes even getting an independent valuation.
Okay.
This ensures that the price offered to investors is reasonable and reflects the actual value of the shares.
So there's a process in place to protect investors from being lowballed.
Exactly. The goal is to make sure that investors are treated fairly throughout the entire delisting process.
Okay, so we've covered transparency and the buyback plan. What about that third protection, a fair price?
Right.
Can you give us some more insights on that?
Sure. As we've already discussed, the fair price is not determined by the company alone.
Right.
There are specific methods and regulations in place to ensure that the price offered to investors is reasonable
Okay.
and reflects the actual value of the shares.
Right.
This might involve considering the company's financial statements, recent trading prices,
Okay.
or even obtaining an independent valuation.
So it's not just, like a random number plucked out of thin air.
Exactly. The goal is to ensure that investors are not taken advantage of during a delisting.
These three protections sound like, like a solid foundation for navigating the delisting process.
They are. And remember that Vietnam Harley Miller is always here to help.
Right.
Our expertise in Vietnamese law and our commitment to supporting expats, make us the ideal partner to guide you through these complexities.
That's right. We understand that, delisting can be a daunting topic,
That's
especially for those who are, new to investing in Vietnam.
Right.
But with the right information and the right support, you can make informed decisions and protect your investments.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And that's why we encourage all expats to, familiarize themselves with the delisting process and procedures guide.
Right.
It's a valuable resource that can help you understand your rights and navigate the complexities of the Vietnamese stock market.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't hesitate to reach out to Vietnam Harley Miller. We're here to answer your questions, clarify any doubts, and provide expert guidance every step of the way.
That's right. We're committed to ensuring that expats have a smooth and successful experience investing in Vietnam.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to the topic of investor awareness.
Right.
It seems like, staying informed is absolutely crucial in this whole delisting process.
You're absolutely right. One of the key takeaways from the delisting process and procedures guide is the importance of being an active and informed investor.
Right.
This means staying up to date on company news and announcements,
Right.
paying attention to stock market trends, and understanding your rights as a shareholder.
So it's not enough to just invest and forget about it.
Exactly. Active involvement is crucial, especially when it comes to potentially complex situations like delisting.
Okay.
By staying informed, you can make better decisions
Yeah.
and protect your investments more effectively.
And that's where Vietnam Harley Miller comes in.
Precisely.
Right.
We're here to provide you with the information and support you need to navigate the Vietnamese investment landscape. with confidence.
Right.
Whether you're dealing with delisting or any other legal or financial matter related to your investments in Vietnam, we're here to help.
That's great to hear. So for all our listeners out there, remember, knowledge is power.
Yes,
Stay informed, be aware of your rights,
absolutely.
and don't hesitate to reach out to the experts at Vietnam Harley Miller for guidance.
And don't forget to check out our Delisting Process and Procedures Comprehensive Guide 2024, available on our website, hemmlf.vn.
Right.
It's packed with valuable information and can be a great starting point for understanding this complex topic.
Delisting in Vietnam can seem complicated.
Right.
But with the right knowledge and resources, you can navigate the process successfully. Thanks for joining us on Vietnam Legal Investment Insights.
It's been a pleasure discussing this important topic with you.
So we've covered, a lot of ground today, from like the reasons behind delisting to the actual steps involved and the protections that are in place for investors. But before we wrap up, I kind of want to touch on one more important aspect.
Yeah.
It's all about perspective.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in, all the technicalities and the potential downsides of delisting. But it's important to remember that delisting isn't always like a negative event.
Right. Sometimes it's just a natural part of a company's evolution.
Exactly. As we discussed earlier, a company might choose to delist for, strategic reasons like restructuring, going private, or moving to a different stock exchange, right?
Right.
These decisions are often made with the company's long-term growth and success in mind.
And in those cases, delisting can actually be a positive sign.
Absolutely. It can signal that the company is, adapting to changing market conditions or pursuing new opportunities. It's all about understanding the context and the rationale behind the decision.
So the key takeaway here is that delisting is not always a cause for alarm.
Precisely. It's about, staying informed, understanding your rights, and making informed decisions as an investor.
And of course, if you're ever unsure or need guidance on any aspect of delisting or investing in Vietnam, you can always reach out to us here at Vietnam Harley Miller.
We're here to help. Our team of experts can provide you with the information and support you need to navigate the Vietnamese legal and investment landscape with confidence.
So remember, delisting is a complex topic, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Right.
By staying informed and seeking expert advice, you can make sure your investments are protected.
Absolutely.
And for those of you looking to learn more, be sure to check out our Delisting Process and Procedures Comprehensive Guide 2024, which is available on our website, hmmlf.vn. Thanks for joining us on Vietnam Legal and Investment Insights. We hope this deep dive into delisting has been helpful.
It's been a pleasure sharing our insights with you today.